Cemetery.
Roosevelt Cemetery,
Okay.
Park Lawn.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I also work for the Harrison Ross Mortuary.
Got you.
The
Okay.
Harrison
Okay.
Ross Mortuary.
Uh huh. I was at Rose Hills for 8 years
Oh,
before
really?
I came to USC. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Ray. Good morning. Thank you. Hi. I don't think I fully understood what was going on because I thought it was a presentation. I'm sorry. I didn't fully understand what it was today. I thought it was a presentation
So what's your
that you
name
were going to
again?
make. What was that?
What was your name?
Dana McKeon. I'm
You
the
Dana.
first one. Yeah.
Okay.
This makes a lot
Oh,
easier.
you're a mortician. Okay.
Yeah, I've been graduated mortuary school in 2013 and then started at Rose Hills in 2014.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a embalmer funeral director.
So Victoria Brown, who's that?
I don't know.
It's me.
Dana.
Here.
Anna, nice to meet you.
Good. How are you? I guess they're probably gonna go according to this.
I would.
Victoria. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. USC. Yeah. You're one of us. Yes. Good. How's the new facility? Yeah. It
It
looks
was a
beautiful.
transition,
Yeah.
but it's
Did it move from Redlands to
no.
here,
So
or is
we
this another
it's
location?
another one. We
Okay.
were our corporate office was in downtown LA,
Got it.
and so we moved from there. So we
Okay.
still have Redlands, although right now it's under some renovations, so
Okay.
it's not the donor care units are
No longer.
like we haven't been staffed anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
mostly
Yeah.
been nurses that
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And a
Oh.
work in progress of
Yeah.
things, because as we're
Yeah. my big mouth, but here we go. Again, that is 2 Corinthians, 1st chapter, verses 3 through 5, English Standard Version. And it reads thusly: Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. For as we share abundantly in Christ's sufferings, so through Christ we share abundantly in comfort too. So that's part of what we're about too.
That's really our ethos. You know, everybody has mission statements and vision statements and all those kind of statements, right? Most of us who have worked in corporate experiences have all those vision statements, some touchstone. Well, ours came from the Bible. We comfort people because God has comforted us. And so when people are doing whatever they're doing, we just continue to remember that God has comforted us. Therefore, we need to offer comfort to other people. Amen. All right, so we're going to start off with each panelist is going to give a brief description about themselves. You have their bio, and so I'm just not a person who likes to read bios that you can read yourself, because usually you've read them before we read them. But we wanted each panelist to be able to share some information about themselves. As you formulate your questions, you will then come to the podium and be able to direct your questions to them.
Good morning. My name is Anna Binder. I am a supervisor for our family support services at One Legacy. Our family support services provides support during the donation process, organ, eye, and tissue donation, and also after. I've been with One Legacy for 14 years, providing grief support. There is no timeline with grief, so our families are involved, whenever they feel like they need the support. Sometimes they come in maybe a year or so after, and sometimes they come back 10 years later because maybe something else happened in their life where they are triggered and would like more support. So we never turn away our families. They are, however they want to be involved. We have many events where we honor our donors. So, and any questions at any point, please feel free. Thank you.
My name is Dana McKeon, and I am the manager of the Anatomical Gift Program at the University of Southern California. We take whole body donation for medical education, where one would donate themselves to us and their body would be utilized in a variety of courses, ranging from the medical school to dentistry, physical therapy, surgical skills training, and we take on the responsibility of providing a proper disposition for those donors and hopefully further someone's medical education.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Harvey, and I'm for 35 years, I've been a pre-need counselor with the Inglewood Park Cemetery. Of course, we're with the Roosevelt and Parkland Cemetery now. Can you guys hear me out there? Oh, you can hear me now, right? Oh, okay, great. Okay, praise God. Oh, start over. Okay, somebody say start over. Okay, praise God. My name is Jessica Harvey, and for over 35 years, I've been a counselor with the Inglewood Park Cemetery, Parkland, and Roosevelt Cemetery. I guess most of you are familiar with those cemeteries. But what we do is we counsel families about pre-need arrangements, where, of course, the subject is not something that most people want to talk about, and we understand that. That's why I'm so patient, and that's why I have the minute that I have right now. But we give you any information that you may want to have before and after If you have any questions for me, I'm here to answer. I pretty much have the answers to everything, you know. Most questions you ask me, I got the answers to them. So I'm thankful to God that we was invited here so I can share with all you folks up in here any information that you may need.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I'm Dr. Natalie Sanders, and I am with Vitas Hospice. We are a national hospice organization that provides medical, spiritual, and personal care to people at the end of life. But the end of life is not necessarily the last 3 days, the last week. In some instances, patients, because they are receiving such wonderful care from both their families and our hospice teams around the country, may live 2, 3 years. So hospice is not the last few hours. It is part of the transition towards the end of life.
Good morning. My name is Felicia Mobley. I am a practicing attorney, and I'm on the panel to explain the differences, advantages, and disadvantages of a living trust versus a will.
Good morning, I'm Victoria Brown. I am with One Legacy. We are the organ procurement organization for Southern California. We cover 7 counties, and I'm here. I work in the community education partnership department, and I am here to educate and answer any questions you have concerning organ donation. Thank you.
All right, now that you know which each person's discipline, you are now free to come to the podium to ask questions and direct them to these experts, the questions that you've always wanted to know, that you now have an opportunity to learn something. Please come to the podium. Just come here so that people can hear and that, that our sound technicians are able to pick up on you.
Good morning. So what exactly is pre-need arrangement? Are you the pre-need, Ms. Harvey? Yes. Can you explain that?
That's pre. You're doing it before you have to do it. You're doing it ahead of time. So you make arrangements before a death should occur so that when a death occurs, then the family doesn't have to do that or try to decide what the family wanted. So when you're doing the pre-need, you're doing it yourself while you're alive. Does that answer your question, sweetheart?
If I can add to that real quick, because we at USC require pre-registration also. Under the law, you have the ultimate right to decide what is done with your body when you die. You are number one. What you want, what you say goes, especially if you make pre-arrangements and or pay for it if payment is required. Once you make that decision in a legal document, that cannot be changed by anybody. So it really gives you the power to say, look, this is what I want. That way the rest, your family, whoever, can't say, well, I want mom to be buried. Well, mom wanted to be cremated and she already paid for it, so too bad. So really, pre-need, that concept is, again, giving you the power to say what happens to your own body.
May I add something? In hospice, one of the things that we actually do as part of our complete assessment of new patients on our service is we actually ask that question of them. And it starts a thought process that we understand what the ultimate outcome will be. And as eloquently by my colleagues here, and if he or she has capacity to make those decisions, to the ultimate control over what happens at this physical body life.
So my question, I have a few questions about the pre-service. When you say pre-service, how do you prepare ahead of time for pre-service if you have not prepared, and what would be the cost of that, of pre-service? Because she said at USC you would have to, if it wasn't paid before, you have a right to do what you want with your organs.
So in general, if payment is required, USC doesn't require payment to donate your body. One Legacy doesn't require payment to donate your body. If you want something as simple as, let's say, a direct cremation with and let your family handle whatever services you want to do, then and you sign up with a cremation society of some kind and pay the $1,500 or whatever their price is at the time, then that's what it is. If you are wanting something more intricate, like a full funeral service, you want to pick your casket, you want to pick your gravesite, you want to pick your urn, you want to pick whatever, those are all things that you would go see Miss Harvey for, and she would generate that contract for you and take care of that.
Okay, I got you. I have one more question for the attorney. When you spoke about a trust in the will, I'd like for you to explain more of the difference, because if you have a direct thought about passing something down to an heir, can they change that from the will or the trust? Because if you ask, I don't want certain things done, and then once they become, you transition and the trust is read, that new heir can come in and say, this is mine and I'm going to do this. Can you really stipulate in your trust how you want your things passed on without being sold or without someone else taking the leadership?
Yes, you absolutely can. Hello? Okay, sorry. Okay. So you absolutely can make that decision, and that's really one of the advantages of a trust. What happens is a lot of times, usually what they call a pour-over will, it basically is a will that work together. The will, you make the trust the beneficiary of your will so that all of your assets can go into the trust. And you don't necessarily need it, but it's advantageous to have the will as well, because many times in trust, people will make a trust 1 year and 5 years later, 10 years later they pass, but there's things they haven't actually named in their trust. And so therefore it's not an asset of the trust. If you have a pour-over will and you say everything I own goes to the trust, that's one way of trying to ensure that all of your assets, whether they were named or not, can potentially end up in the trust.
Okay.
So once you, and I think the terminology you're using when you say, can a beneficiary come along and change anything? A beneficiary has, or an heir has no control over any decisions or assets in your trust. It's your successor trustee. So normally when you make a living trust, you are the initial trustee, you're the grantor. And so you may remain in that position until you pass or until you're incapacitated. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you have already named in your trust a successor trustee. And once that person takes over, they are to follow your directions to the T, unless in your trust you give them discretion to do certain things. Mm-hmm. And one of the, just since I'm talking about, I'll say this, one of the major, if any of you ever try to even prepare your own trust, one of the major issues that come up with trusts is that a person will put their home, or any property they own, they'll name it as a trust asset, but a lot of times they will forget to go back and actually take a grant deed and transfer that property into the trust.
Okay.
So technically, if it's not into the trust, and the way it reads is, Mary Sue, grants to Mary Sue, the trustee of the Mary Sue Trust. That's how your deed would read, so that it's in your trust. Mm-hmm. it's not the end of the world if you don't do it. Hopefully you will, so you can avoid. Then you'll end up in probate, trying to get what's called a Hegstad petition to have the court declare your certain assets, whether it's a bank account, whether it's your property, have them declare that property to be part of your trust. And then you just proceed with the trust outside of the probate process once you get that declaration.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
That would be so helpful because we're not picking up everything.
I have a question here before we get off of this conversation.
Yes, please.
So, okay, so I want to ask, so it sounds like, is that pullover wheel that in your...
You can take this out. It's easier.
No, this is fine, okay. Well, my understanding, I'm trying to get what you're saying. So the pullover wheel, that will, if I forget to put something in my trust, like you say, years may pass by and I should pass away, is that pullover wheel, does that will it to the trust? Because I have that, is that, would that?
No, what happens, a pour-over will, that basically says everything you own.
Right.
You're right. The trust is the heir, I'll say it
Right.
that way, of your will.
Mm-hmm.
So that everything you own, you're giving to the trust.
Right. Okay. So if I forget to put something in there, that pullover wheel would take care of that.
Not necessarily. It won't necessarily take care of it. It'll definitely give the court, if you have to go to court under a Hegstad petition, it will let the court know what your intention was, even if you didn't actually do it.
I didn't quite hear that, but
What I said was, what will happen is that doesn't necessarily solve it. Like I said, if you have a piece of property that you list it as a trust asset, but you haven't actually transferred it with a deed into your trust,
right.
or a bank account where you have no beneficiary, that can help the court know that that was your intention to have all of your assets
Right, okay.
become a trust asset.
Okay, yeah.
Even though it wasn't specifically carried out.
Okay. That's what I was asking.
Okay.
Okay, good morning. My name is Carla, and I have quite a few questions, and a lot of them are about the trust. So, do you need to have a trust bank account in order to cash any refinance in order to cash any checks then that are made out to your home that is in the trust once you place everything in the trust?
Once you place everything in the trust, if you look at your trust sort of, or like a corporation or a child, that is the name. So if somebody's paying money to the trust, yes, you would need a bank account that basically has the trust, basically has the trust name on it.
Okay.
So that they're actually receiving that income or those payments.
Okay. Do I need term insurance on that trust account in order to ensure then when I pass that my son can maintain the current mortgage payment instead of having to requalify for his own mortgage based upon his income and credit score? And how do I go about getting that term insurance for the trust account?
Okay, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, do you want to get term insurance so that your child has enough money to pay the mortgage?
No. So from my understanding, in order to maintain what my current mortgage is, because that's part of the trust, that if we had term insurance on that, then he would not have to try to get a new mortgage once I pass, that he would continue what's in existence now. Is that correct? And
I'm not familiar with that, and that may be some feature that some
Okay.
insurance companies offer. I do know that when you have insurance and you have a death benefit, there are certain policies that will pay off the mortgage that you can pay for, and there'll be no mortgage. But in terms of the property can be conveyed to your son, the mortgage obligation will remain If he wants to decrease it or eliminate it, that would be up to him to go in and qualify for that.
So when you say remain, so if I pass, he can just continue paying that without having to go and get his own new loan?
That's correct. He can continue to pay it.
Okay, great. Because that was my big concern with the way prices are nowadays and young folks trying to qualify for those large amounts at that time. Okay, I'm in the process of divorcing after a 7-month marriage. I have a house in a revocable trust. Can my husband try to get any part of that or break that revocable trust?
Okay, so if you're putting community property assets into a trust,
No, I had the home prior to marriage.
okay.
The home was placed in a trust prior to marriage.
Was there a mortgage on that home?
Yes, there's a mortgage on the home.
And during your marriage, did you pay the mortgage?
I paid everything.
Okay. Well, once you're married, once you say I do, it's your income from that. The first penny is community property.
But even if the income, I also have all my bank accounts and all my savings accounts in the trust. So the trust owns all of that, correct? Not me.
This is more of a complicated, it's a family law issue. I'll say this because I do know the answer.
Okay.
Basically, what I'm trying to explain to you is anything you earn from the point you get married on is community property. If you had a piece of property that you owned before marriage, and you kept those assets completely separate, meaning this, not your income, because your income's community property. If you had income from the property and you had a separate account and that income from the property paid the mortgage and all the expenses separate from your income or any other thing that generated after you were married, that could remain a separate asset.
Okay.
But
No.
just because it's in your trust doesn't necessarily mean it stays a separate asset. Whatever you owned up to the point you got married, that is separate.
Okay.
After that, if you start paying the mortgage with your income, the community starts gaining an interest in the property, which is a much more complicated issue. But
Okay. Okay. Then another question is, can I leave things in my trust to my future grandchildren? They haven't been born yet, but can I anticipate that and leave something allocated to them in the trust?
yes, there's some provisions that you can write in that leaves it to unborn grandchildren. However, it's a little bit more complicated, but you can do that, and if there are no grandchildren, then you just dictate where it goes in the event that there are no grandchildren.
Okay. Okay, then donating my body. I'm going to be donating my body to science. I'm a retired dean from a community college, and I know how desperate cadavers are needed. Can you donate directly to a medical group like UCLA, or can I donate directly to a college like USC or UCLA?
Absolutely, and that's what's preferred.
Okay.
There are 9 body donation programs through medical universities in the state of California, 5 of which are in Southern California. I will list those for you. UC San Diego, UC Irvine, USC, UCLA, Loma Linda, 6, and Western University in Pomona.
Okay.
All of those schools take whole body donation. You may register specifically to any of those schools. They all have their own set of donation forms. Just so you all know, I left donation forms on the information table outside so that you can take a look at those and see what that entails. If there's 2 different ways of donating your body to science. One is directly to the university that you're intending to bequeath your body to. The other would be to go through a company called MedCure or Science Care. those are for-profit companies that generally are looked at as a brokerage of bodies of sorts, for lack of a better way to explain it, where entities that need cadavers for their research or courses or whatever they're doing, that don't have their own that don't have their own a system of accepting donations, would pay for that company to say, hey, I have a course going on next week, I need 3 cadavers, can you sell them to me? So it really just depends on the route that you want to go. All of the medical schools that accept donations are not for profit. We don't accept monies for bodies. We do accept reimbursement for the cost that it takes us to care for our donors, but we don't make any money off of any of our donors. So,
And should this also be indicated in our trust?
So what I tend to find is that if someone is willing to donate their body, they're sometimes also willing to donate organs. This is important to note that you cannot do both. You cannot donate your organs, then go on and donate your whole body. So what I usually suggest is, if organ donation is something important to you, then you go ahead and sign up for that by all means, because the chance that your donation of organs is going to be accepted is not a guarantee. So if you die, you want to donate your organs, your family calls the organ donation company and they say, no, thank you. Then you can donate your whole body. So you're covered on both ends. But it's really a very personal choice. It's up to you which is more important. And likewise, if you donate your whole body, you cannot then go and donate your organs. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Good morning. How are you all? Okay. Sorry. My question's actually going to take it a little more to the basics of the event of a funeral. My question, long story short, is why is it so expensive? I say this in the context, I don't know if some of you have heard, there was a car crash in Pasadena last week that killed 3 people, some of which were from my high school. So in that, I know we briefly mentioned GoFundMe. We briefly mentioned that process of bereavement, which for these families came way too soon. But again, back to my question, what are the factors that contribute to the price of a funeral? And how much variance could there exist in that space? Anyone can take it.
Yeah, please share that with you. To the mic. Oh, okay. Well, first of all, when you say why are funerals so expensive, funerals is what you want them to be, depending on what you want in the funeral. You may want, on the low end, normally a funeral runs anywhere around, for mortuaries and cemeteries, it's 2 different entities. So you have you have a mortuary, first of all, that you have to attend when a death occurs. And secondly, you have to deal with a cemetery, which are both separate. In a mortuary, you're running about maybe anywhere from $3,500, maybe to $7,500. So, but in between there, it depends on what all you want. Whether you want a graveside service, what type of casket that you may want. You're looking at caskets anywhere from about $1,000 on up to whatever the family can afford to pay. So we normally give you based on what you want, what you're capable, what you're able to afford to pay. So that depends on the individual again. We're dealing with the cemetery. Your cemeteries are normally, you're going to look at anywhere from, talking of Inglewood, Roosevelt, and Park Lawn, because those are the ones that I'm familiar with, definitely on the price-wise. Maybe anywhere from $5,000 on up. And that, again, that depends on whether we're talking about cremations or what are you talking about, the actual burials, ground or mausoleum burials? So we put it together with what the family actually can afford, you know, and that's so it's expensive or less expensive as you make it.
Okay.
If I can add to that and
Just a second.
Oh, sure.
Did you have another question for me?
No.
My background is funeral directing and embalming, and prior to working at USC, I worked for a mortuary for 8 years and was very much a part of the funeral service process. Funeral service is a business, first and foremost, and the business of funeral service is created upon traditions. So as a community, all we know when someone dies is that you're supposed to have a funeral service. You're supposed to call a mortuary. You're supposed to pick a casket. You're supposed to have a service where people come and attend in a chapel or whatever your choice is. There is so much more than that, and or so much less than that you can do. If you wanted to, you could go get a permit for the local park for $50 and go have your funeral service or memorial service, which the difference is a memorial service does not have the body present, and do your own thing. The mortuary's job is to help you facilitate all of these things. Because in a grief state, you don't necessarily have the bandwidth, the mental bandwidth, if you will, to plan all of this. Think you're planning a wedding, essentially, in 3 to 5 days. That's something that people take a year to plan. So the mortuary's job is to help you facilitate that. Caskets are expensive. Think of them as a piece of furniture. You know, you would pay $1,000 for a dresser for your home. That takes the same amount of wood and craftsmanship as a casket does. Unfortunately, it feels like it impacts you and the family negatively because you feel like you're being taken advantage of. But the fact, for the most part, is that things cost a lot of money, especially right now. If you want to print your own programs at home, you're welcome to do that. You don't have to have the mortuary do it for you and pay them $300 to do it. They're offering you a service. You don't have to take it. So that's why the pre-need aspect is so important, because you can, with your mental faculties, pick and choose what you want and not get bombarded by the endless choices that then you feel guilty for not giving your loved one what you think they deserve. Well, I want to save money, so I'm not going to get 3 flower pieces because they're too expensive or whatever. Then reach out to someone maybe you don't know at your church or work or something, someone that does flowers as a hobby. They will do them for you. So there's, like Reverend Sandra was saying, open your mind to these things. Just because there's tradition behind them doesn't mean that we need to follow it. So.
Can I make a comment about the funeral? I'm with One Legacy, and I just want to take the opportunity to dispel a myth. Many people believe that if you donate your organs, that you are unable to have an open casket funeral. That is not the case. We have a funeral person who works in our organization, and she works with the funeral homes to make sure that we can ensure that you have the type of funeral or gathering that you would like to have. So I just want to dispel that one myth that people have, that if you are an organ donor, you cannot have an open casket, and that is not the case.
Again, I want to ask you, what was your question? Your question was your question why a funeral is so expensive?
Yeah, basically.
I just want to make sure.
Long story short, yes. Specifically as it relates to factors, it looks like casket and option
Right.
play a role.
Exactly.
And then variance, which we also talked about.
Right.
So yeah, thank you
Okay.
all so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent questions. Excellent questions. I have a question as it relates to palliative and hospice care. You said that it's not the last 3 days before life. Could you maybe expand on some of the offerings? And how do I get palliative? First of all, what's the difference between hospice and palliative care? And then after that, how then do I have access to those resources?
Thank you. Let me start with hospice because that's what most people. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Not yet.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So let me start with hospice care. Hospice is technically defined as care at the end of life. And hospice is regulated, because we live in an era where lots of things are regulated, and you have to be licensed. But hospice is regulated by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So that's a federal entity. So there are actually eligibility criteria to be admitted to hospice. So when we receive referrals for patients, we look at the criteria and we have to determine whether or not they meet those criteria. The number one criteria is that the certifying physician who has to sign the certificate of terminal illness is certifying that, in my best estimation as a clinician, this patient does not have more than 6 months to live. Now, we all know that doctors are not omniscient and do not have ultimate power. That is predetermined. And because of that, there is a process that each hospice agency has to go through with their patients, that every 6 months there has to be recertification for eligibility. And just from the regulatory standpoint, as long as patients are showing continued decline in their functional or cognitive status, there will not be the impression of essentially fraud. So think of hospice as last 6 months, even though I've had patients that have been on hospice 3, even 5 years. I believe part of that is because they got such good care, their life was prolonged. The other, so then when you start talking about palliative care, think about palliative care as pre-hospice. So just like you go to kindergarten, you can go to pre-K. Palliative care are for people who have a chronic medical condition that is likely to cause their life to end in the next 12, 18, or 24 months. And depending upon the entity that is providing the palliative care, there are additional criteria such as they must have a skilled need where they need a licensed healthcare provider doing certain kinds of monitoring. Palliative? Palliative. Palliative. P as in Paul, ALLIATIVE. And I do know that it can be confusing because even in hospice, we are constantly asking, is this intervention that we are making for the patient one that would effect an ultimate cure of their underlying condition, or is it something that's going to palliate, essentially relieve pain and suffering? So is that helpful, Sandra? Okay. All right.
Good morning, everyone. My question is for the attorney. First of all, I would like to know, we talked briefly about pour over wills. Can you give the definition of that?
A pour-over will is a will that essentially pours over all of your assets to the trust.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't go through a name specific bequeaths or gifts. It just says all of my assets are to be given to my trust.
Okay. My next question, well, I'll have to give you kind of a example or a scenario to get to the question. Okay, I had a friend that her son was in a very serious car accident, and it was determined that the fault was on someone else, not him at all. And so the person that hit him had all of their assets in a trust. So that made them not responsible as far as any of his medical needs or any of made them not have to pay anything because everything she owned was in a trust. So can you tell me what kind of trust that would be?
A living trust can be revocable or irrevocable. So when it's revocable, that means you can, as the trustee who's still living, the person who created the trust, you can move your assets in and out of it because it's revocable. You can change it, you can cancel it, you can terminate it, you can pull a property out, put a property back in. Once it becomes irrevocable, you do not have the authority to move your assets around. All you can do is manage the trust. And once it's irrevocable, it almost becomes impenetrable from creditors because you no longer own it. Once it becomes irrevocable, and a living trust will, even if it's revocable, it'll become irrevocable at your death. But if you make it irrevocable during your life, you no longer own those assets to do anything with it. It belongs, it's in a, let's say it's in a holding state for your beneficiaries, but you cannot ever take it back to use it. So in those situations when you have creditors that are seeking to collect from the individual, they no longer own those assets.
Okay.
And typically people don't care for irrevocable trusts during their life because if they have property as they get older, they may want to do a reverse mortgage, they may want to take it out and sell it. So, you know, there's all kind of things you may want to do that you will not be able to do once it's irrevocable.
So if you have an irrevocable trust, you can't do anything with it while you're living.
Well, it's kind of a broad statement. When you say you can't do anything with it, you can do what the trust dictates can be done with it as the trustee, because you're still the trustee of it. If it dictates that in 10 years sell this property and give it to my grandchild, that's what you would do because that's what you're instructed to do in an irrevocable trust. But it's it's nothing in that trust that you can take back and become your own personal property.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. I hope I get this question right. Either it's the trust or the will where you know there's going to be fighting amongst relatives. Which one of those can you put $1 in there, whoever might be doing the fighting, to where they won't get anything? It's true.
Yeah. You can put that in either one. I'm sorry. You can put that in a will, or you can put that in a trust. You can put that they get $1. But what I will caution you, although you didn't ask this, I will caution you that if you put the reason why you're doing that, then you're opening up that
Can of worms.
That gift to become contestable. I'll give you an example. And just say a person is in jail, right? And the person says, I'm giving Joe $1 because, he's been in jail, he's been a problem all his life. That person lives for another 20 years, doesn't have a lot of contact with him, and then she dies, and there's this provision saying, I'm not going to leave anything to him because he's just been a problem all the time. And he can go to court and say, she thought that then, but I've become the president of the United States since then, and she didn't know that. So for her giving that reason, we shouldn't rely on that because that's no longer the case. So that opens you up for a contest.
So in other words, if you want to leave that person $1, you just don't say why. You just leave them $1.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Mrs. Harvey. I have a question for Mrs. Harvey on pre-need. The cost of when we first bought made our well, can't get anything out. When we first bought our pre-need years ago, I want to make sure, I want to be reassured that that holds today because prices has increased prosperously. How does that work?
We're talking about a pre-need with a cemetery?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Like in the beginning when we say pre-need. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Excuse me? Oh.
You're making it further from
All right, okay. I'm a heart to my mind. Okay. As when we first started, when I mentioned the pre-need, that's something that you do ahead of time?
Yes.
Okay. Once you've done that pre-need with the cemetery, no matter how high those prices go up, the purpose of doing it ahead of time was to lock those prices in. So the prices in the cemetery, you're never affected by an increase in the cost of it.
Okay.
Never. That property, whatever you paid for it, that's what it is. If you did not purchase everything that you need, like opening and closing and nameplates and like that you would have to get with the counselor to make sure you take care of that part. But as far as buying your plot or whatever you purchased, it's locked in. Doesn't matter how high it goes.
Okay, well, that was all, that was done with the cemetery and the funeral.
Okay,
home.
now let's say with the funeral homes that if I know insurance, whatever you've done there, anything like your professional services, anything that doesn't stipulate non-guaranteed, then that's locked in, no matter how high that goes up, because your funds are normally guaranteed through a trust or an insurance company when you take out your pre-need with mortuaries. Yeah. So on your plan, it would stipulate non-guaranteed. If anything is on your contract that say non-guaranteed, that means whatever was on your contract that you paid for, the difference, you will have to pay the difference in today's cost because they're not guaranteeing that in the end, such as sales taxes. Because depending on how high sales taxes go up, that's one thing that's always in the non-guaranteed items. So anything non-guaranteed on your contract, that means what you paid go toward whatever today's cost is. Okay. Anything else, caskets or whatever, no matter how high it goes up, you don't pay no difference. Okay. All right. Because on your contract, on your pre-need, the dividends in that should be enough to take care of the growth. And if it isn't, a mortuary just has to eat it. family doesn't have to affect
Okay.
mine.
Thank you. Yes, I don't know your name. Felicia. On the grant deed, can you explain the grant deed? We have to go through an attorney for that, right? To have it. I never thought of it. I didn't know about it. What's the grant deed? Into the trust. You say you have to do a grant deed. You mentioned the word grant deed into a trust.
Yes, they actually have deeds that have trust deeds on it, where it's specifically for conveying property in and out of a trust. I would suggest that you'd have either an attorney or a real estate broker who knows how to deal with deeds, knows what goes on it, so it's properly done. But basically, it would go from you, Joe Blow, to Joe Blow, trustee of the Joe Blow Trust.
Okay.
So that's how it gets into your trust. But I think you probably would benefit from, like I said, a real estate broker or an attorney helping you with that.
Okay. Another thing is Proposition 13. That's been a battle lately. They're trying to get rid of it from the word news that I've heard. I'm under the impression that if, for instance, when the wife and I, we're in a hurry for it, but when the wife and I go, that if the kids change to do anything to the property, it's no longer covered under Proposition 13. I don't know whether you're familiar with that or not.
Are you referring to the tax increase
Yes.
that will occur?
Yes.
Okay, so as of now, there are exclusions for grandchildren and children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you have to request that exclusion so that the property tax does not change. However, so that the property tax doesn't change. However, you have to, it's time sensitive, and just off the top of my head, I believe it's a year from the time the person dies, you have to fill out that exclusion so that the property tax doesn't change. Also, the most important thing about that, what changes they did make, is if the child inherits the property, the exclusion only applies if they plan to live in the property.
Oh, I see. They can't rent it out or anything like that.
They won't be entitled to the exclusion if it's not their, it doesn't become their primary residence.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you both.
Hi, I have two questions regarding organ donations. So is it true that if you're an organ donor that they let you die sooner so they can harvest your organs faster?
Thank you so much for asking that question.
Yes.
That is our #1 myth. And does anyone know what oath doctors take when they become a doctor? Yes, the Hippocratic oath, and is the oath to save your life. They don't go to college for 8-10 years, spend tons of money to let you pass and not save your life. And there's actually two different sets of doctors. There's a doctor that is there to save your life and do all that they can do to ensure your life. But once it has reached that point and they've determined that there is brain death, you will not recover, then they will reach out to One Legacy, and then only at that point will we see if you're on the registry. We have no idea if you're on the registry or not until it reaches that point. And one thing I encourage everyone to do is to sign up to be a donor, but also to inform your family of your decision, especially if you're under the age of 18. You can go on and become a register at the age of 13, but the final decision lays with your family until you are 18. And even after 18, if you're signed up to be a donor and your family wants to fight the hospital, the doctors on your decision, it can affect whether those organs are, there's a time period in which we can do the donation. All the infighting and everyone not knowing what your decision is can prolong the activity of whether we can actually donate or not. So it's so important to let your family and friends know. And thank you.
And my other question is, if it's so important, why is it set up that we need to opt into organ donating, then rather everyone's like signed up and we have to opt out? Because it's the same right?
So interesting. But we are a political country, and we like to find things to divide us on. And that's mostly all I can say. In other countries, I believe in Germany, it's an opt-out.
Yeah, so then
option.
everyone, they still have the same right to not.
Yes, so everyone is in until they opt out, and I believe their opt-out rate is only 15, 20%, whereas I have to say South LA, we have one of the lowest donation rates in all 7 counties, and we tend to need organs more than anyone else in the Black and brown community. But I was just looking at the statistics yesterday. In Compton, there are only 22% of people who opt in to be a donor to save someone's life. So thank you very much for that. And eventually down the line, we would like to change that as an opt-out instead of an opt-in.
Is there like a law we'd have to have, or what would be the process of getting that changed?
It
like
would
petitions?
be a very long process in law. At one point, I don't know if everyone remembers, I am in my mid-50s, and back when I got my driver's license, we all talked about being an organ donor. Put the pink dot on, pink dot on. A couple of decades ago, you couldn't go into the DMV and talk about donation because they thought we were trying to buy everyone's organs. And so now we're just now kind of getting back into the DMVs to talk about it, but I think it's so important for us to get out into the community to talk about it because a lot of people are doing online registration, and a lot of kids aren't driving nowadays. Back in my day, everybody drove. Now I have a 17-year-old, only 23% of his group have driver's license. So it's harder. That's why my job is even more important now, to get out into the community and talk about organ donation before you get into the hospital.
Right, because I know a lot of people who don't even know it's an option, and they wouldn't mind being an organ donor, but because it's not even presented, it's not even, like, people don't care about it then.
Yes, thank you, and come talk to me afterwards.
Thank you.
Can I add to Victoria's? So when you do register to be an organ donor, it is important to have that conversation with your family because it is a legal document. So even if your family, is surprised or, are against it, our job is to honor your wishes if that's what you had wanted to do. So it's very important to have that conversation because, like Dana had said, it's a legal document.
Am I on? Okay, I'm sorry. I was interrupted on a church-related matter here, just as the attorney was explaining about Proposition 13, and you were stating that you had to request, I think, an exclusion, but you didn't say to where. I don't know if that would be for the county assessors. And I couldn't hear what you were saying as to the likelihood of that prevailing, whether it was the primary, to become the primary residence of one of the children or the grandchildren. Could you go back to that, if you don't mind, and explain how property taxes are impacted when the owner, the prior homeowner, dies, if their child wants to remain in that property, but they would like to ask for an exclusion on an increase in the taxes, property taxes.
Yes, what I said earlier was you'd have to apply for the exclusion. It's time sensitive, and like I said off the top of my head, I believe it's about a year from the death that you have to apply for the exclusion, and that's on the LA County Assessor's website. If you go under forms, they'll give you you'll see exclusion, you just tap on that. They actually even say it's parent to child or grandparent to grandchild. So the issue is that it has to become their primary residence.
Thank you.
They have
That's
to
the
live
piece.
in it in
All
order
right.
for the exclusion to take effect.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is my last question or not, but at any rate. So when it comes to mortuaries, is it true that things have changed to where you do not accept outside caskets like someone purchasing something from Costco?
To my knowledge, it is illegal for any mortuary not to accept an outside casket.
It's illegal.
To my knowledge, it's illegal for any mortuary to not to accept an outside casket. Dealing with the Irish and Ross mortuary, we accept, people can go anywhere they want to get their casket and have it brought in. The only thing, they just have to make an appointment to have it delivered. That's
Okay.
it, but we do accept it.
Okay, thank you.
Initially, when I got in line, I had a question about the cost of a living trust and what is the process in getting prepared for, your own demise? Because I've started a living trust, but then it's like, what do I do next? Get a plot, get a casket, get a this, get a that. So I would like for you to outline the steps. But now I want to piggyback on the previous question about the lack of donors, because you were saying how it's down in LA. And then I kind of wrote down some ideas like, what if your body is diseased? Or, you got this, you got that, you got AIDS, you got cancer, you got STD, you have trouble there. So how can you can't just donate there if we've got these conditions?
Yes, you
right?
can.
What?
Yes. We do not make that determinant. We let the doctors at that point make the determinant. There have been studies where they have transplanted an HIV heart into an HIV patient. It prolonged their life. There was someone recently who had to make a decision on whether he wanted I believe a kidney that had hepatitis. And he made that decision to take the kidney that had hepatitis, and it was able to get him to the next kidney. Some people think there's no age limit. I believe the most recent donation, Anna can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe an 85-year-old made a donation. And in my own personal life, my grandfather received a heart at 69 because he was in good shape. He was a sergeant in the Army, and he was in good enough shape to take a heart and survive for another 8 years. And so it depends on many factors, whether they come together. There's certain metrics when it comes to donating and the complexity of the donation. And if you come to our lunchtime presentation, we'll kind of talk about that. And there's many ways you can save lives.
Okay, because I remember the man who got the animal donation, but
He just passed for about 2 months.
Yes.
And that's something new that
people are trying.
Are trying. Pretty soon, believe it or not, they will be growing organs. There have been studies where people are growing organs. But I have a question. Does anyone know the one organ that you cannot transplant? I heard it.
Brain.
The brain.
Oh, okay.
But it will happen soon.
What?
I'm not saying, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay, so now to the questions of really what are the steps besides fast and pray for preparing for?
Real quick, I want to iterate that body donation is different than organ donation. If you have anything considered to be contagious, then whole body donation is probably not an option for you. And this is because there's not a lot of studies on deceased humans and how they can transmit or anything contagious. So with students and faculty members working with our whole bodies, it would not be prudent for us to accept anyone who has something that is considered to be a bloodborne contagious disease.
So that donation wouldn't be accepted?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to hear about the steps besides accepting the Lord as your Christ as your Savior. I mean, I want to know, what do you do first to be ready or to have your family ready so they don't have to worry? I've started a living trust. I want to know the cost of it, the going cost, and then what do you do by a plot, and then what do you do?
Okay. Let me just share something, because a question was asked in the beginning about pre-need.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Well, I know, but it was great. No problem.
Okay.
Pre-need. Pre-need referring to, these are things you do ahead of time. Pre-need.
Right.
Different entities.
Right.
As far as the cemetery is concerned, I can go through whatever you need to do preparing pre-need. I have my colleague here, Linda Perkins, is here to take and give you any information, give you some information on pre-need with cemeteries.
Okay.
Right. As far as the pre-need with what the young lady here is talking about, that's still, you have to prepare ahead of time. If pre-need, it's always something you do while you're living, and you can do it.
You're talking about the body donation. Oh, yeah.
The body donation.
I think I heard
now,
that.
Right, before you do it. Now, anything you need to know as far as the cemetery and how you start preparing for it, then we can give you all that information after this meeting is over, wherever they allow us to do it.
Okay.
And we'll give you information to take home with you as well.
Oh, okay.
I would say your number one starting point is to make a list, make some decisions. Think about what you want done with your body, what's important to you, what's not important to you. Then sit down with your legal next of kin, who's going to be your spouse, your children, your siblings if you don't have a spouse or children, your parents, whoever that may be. And if something's not important to you, maybe it's important to them. Maybe you're like, donate my body and do whatever you want with it. That doesn't fly with some people, but ultimately it's your choice. So I think that's a really hard question to answer because the variables are so vast. So really kind of funneling and narrowing down what it is that you're looking for and what you want is a good starting point. I would also say that a good starting point is to ask your doctor for an advanced healthcare directive. Every primary care physician will give you one. You can even find one online. Your advanced healthcare directive is really a good first step in letting people know what you want done with your body. If you are incapacitated physically, do you want to be on a respirator, a ventilator? Do you want to be tube fed? Do you want to be resuscitated? And we're not talking about a DNR. We're talking about an advanced healthcare directive, which is a legal document. And that has to be followed, that you name an agent to carry out these wishes. Do you want to be buried, cremated, whatever the case may be? Do you want your body donated, organs donated? That is an excellent starting point to give you a framework of the types of things that you need to get your brain thinking about when making these decisions. Don't wait. And I'll tell you, I have people call me and say, you know, my dad always said he wanted to donate his body to USC, and he went to USC, and, well, did he pre-register with us? No, he didn't. Okay, does he have an advanced healthcare directive that indicates that his intention was to donate his body? Because we will not take someone's body against their will. So we need proof that their intention was to donate. And if we don't have that, we will not accept. And that's not, you know, to make things difficult on the family. It's in the interest of the donor. If it's not something they wanted, then we're not inclined to accept their donation.
May I add something?
Please.
Thank you, Dana, for bringing up this whole issue of advanced healthcare directives, because this is so very much needed. And in our community, we are not always thinking ahead about what we do want with regard to how our person is handled towards the end of life. And it also has to be executed while we still have the mental capacity. If someone already has dementia, they may not have the capacity to synthesize the information to make the ultimate decisions. So this advanced healthcare directive is extremely important. All of us should have one.
And it was the cost of the living trust. Does any range, please? Okay, I'll leave in a minute.
It varies. It really varies. Depends on who does it for you. It depends on what you're going to be. Sorry. It varies drastically. It depends on who you ask to do it for you, what you're going to be including in it, how complicated it is. It's going to be a sub-trust. It's going to be an educational trust within the trust for your children. It's just no way for me to give you a figure that you could rely upon.
Depending on what company you work for, larger companies tend to do this. When your open enrollment for your benefits comes around, see if they have an option for legal aid. USC offers that to their employees. It's about $12 a month. And I have unlimited legal aid for any reason. That includes if I wanted to generate a will, trust, what have you.
I
So
have something like that with
I
Legal
encourage you
Shield,
to,
yeah.
yes, to look into that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I am just so excited about all of this. I can't tell you how excited. We were supposed to stop at 11:30 for this panel one, but this has been an incredible experience. We are going to take two more questions. Not that we're going to make two more questions that they can answer in a timely manner, and then we're going to break for lunch. And when we break for lunch, we will have a presentation for One Legacy. And they will be able to share even more information about tissue organ donation. We will come back at 12:30, and we will then have an opportunity to speak to our experts in grief and therapy and those kind of things when our feelings are hurting. And so we'll come back promptly at 12:30, if you will. So I'm just so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please stay for the rest of the afternoon to make sure that that you can even learn from the people that are here. We have several resource tables outside. And on those resource tables, I feel like my back is to people, so sorry. So we have several resources tables outside. One, Mark Smith is here. He is a senior life insurance advisor. I promised you, and all of our panelists understand, and all the people here, they are not here to sell you anything. They are here to share information with you so that you can make good choices. So when you see the resource table, take them so that you can think about things that you need to do for yourselves. And of course, because they've come, we would hope that you would talk to them and maybe take advantage of the resources that they have available for you. Okay? Are we all good with that? All right. So we're going to take two more questions, and then after that, it'll be lunch questions on your lunchtime.
Me again. So first, I just wanted to follow up on the whole body donation. Is there time sensitivity with that also? And if you have like a blood disorder, thalassemia minor, that's not contagious, can they still take your whole body donation?
Okay. So, time sensitivity. Most body donation programs require the donor be in their care after death within 48 hours. This is because we have to perform a blood test for contagious blood diseases. Sometimes there's some wiggle room there. It really just depends, but it's the practice is within 48 hours, which is another reason why pre-registration is so important. The last thing you want to do, or your family to do, is to panic and say, we need to donate their body, we need the paperwork, we need this. Well, if you pass it at 2 in the morning, and then that gives you 48 hours to do all of this work that could have been done 10 years ago, you know. The main things that would disqualify someone from whole body donation, even if they are registered, I will say that again, even if you are registered with a whole body donation, it does not guarantee acceptance because there are variables. If someone passes away in a car accident and requires an autopsy, that automatically disqualifies their whole body donation. Okay. Because if we're teaching anatomy to anatomy students, we cannot do that if you've been autopsied. Okay. If someone has severe jaundice or let's say edema when the body retains a lot of water, these make the preservation process extremely difficult and could render the donor ineligible as a cadaver with those preservation challenges. So the likelihood that you would be accepted is very low with those types of things. If someone dies during a surgery or has some kind of large open wound, like serious bed sore or something that is very deep and is compromising the integrity of the skin, that also makes it very difficult to preserve the donor. So that would render someone ineligible to donate. So even if you register yourself with a body donation program, I would always recommend to have a secondary plan in place just in case that donation is rejected. And it could be for something as simple as the program is full and they don't have the room. So, so the donation is appreciated but not guaranteed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, one last question is, and I'm not sure to who, if you own a home and you need to go to a care facility, do you need to sell that home in order for the state to take care of you, or if it's in a trust, is your home protected?
I'm not sure what you're asking. If you're in a trust, if your home's in a trust, is it protected? If you go into a state facility, we're protected from what?
A care facility. So if I'm disabled and I need to go to a care facility and I own a home, do I have to sell that home in order for the care facility to accept me and take care of me with state funds? If that home is in a trust, can we keep the home? Or do I have to sell the home in order for the care facility to accept me and take care of me?
Can I comment on that? I'm a 20-year realtor, okay. And actually I know of a neighbor whose mother went into a mental facility and they couldn't pay the state to take care of her. The state put a lien on the property, and unfortunately the daughter is unable to sell the property as long as the mother is still in a state facility. So that
trust doesn't help that.
Trust doesn't help that.
Thank you very much.
Hi. When you're dealing with someone maybe with dementia, Alzheimer, and we want to get a power of attorney, does it need to be worded differently, or do you just go and get a general power of attorney and, you know, I authorize X, Y, and Z to handle various things? Should it be different wording or a special power of attorney or just a regular one?
That's a complex question.
Oh, okay.
It's not an easy answer. That's why I think while we have capacity, we need to execute certain documents.
Right. Well, she's in the capacity now, so we're trying to get ready. But so we wanted to do a power of attorney, but we just didn't know.
If she has no capacity at this point in time, I think it's best to go through the courts.
No, she
Yes.
does have capacity at this time.
She has a diagnosis of dementia?
Not yet. It's Parkinson's, which
Okay.
mimics.
Okay, got it. Okay. Then if she has capacity now, she can execute documents as anyone else could. So that would not be a problem.
Right, but I'm like, okay, so she has the capacity now.
Right.
But when she becomes, right. Okay, so it doesn't have
So
to
while
be,
she has capacity, she can designate, I want my daughter, my son, whoever to be my surrogate decision maker.
Got it, okay, all right.
The challenge we have is when there is not that person.
Got it.
And so, remember, this is the thing, this was called Get Your House in Order. So these are the things that we need to do ourselves before someone else has to do them for us. And so those couple of last questions implied that we were not going to do things for ourselves before we were not able to do them. So be encouraged that you might want to make some decisions for yourselves as you get your house in order. Amen. So now we will break for lunch. Our lunches are on the patio. Some of our panelists have to leave, but can we give them an applaud or something? I think they've done an outstanding job. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much for coming. They have left resources, packages out on the breezeway. We have many resources. When you get your lunch, please go over to the executive conference room, which is right next door. You can eat your lunch. There'll be a short presentation. You'll still have time to kind of have a moment down. It's not, the presentation won't take your whole lunch time, but please go over and join in the presentation.